He woke up to 20 children praying for him. He didn't know their names, they didn't know his, and that somehow is where everything began. Kong Ji-hoon, known in certain circles as the Grey Wolf, one of the most feared figures in the Korean criminal network operating in this city, didn't end up in a hospital that night. He didn't end up with his people. He ended up unconscious at the iron gate of a small orphanage, on the old side of town, his coat torn, his watch cracked, rain still cold on his face, and inside that orphanage was Sophie Ann Caldwell, 34 years old, black, beautiful, with straight black hair in a butterfly cut, and eyes that never showed fear even when the situation called for it. The sole director of Hope Garden Home, where 20 black children between 8 and 9 years old had been left by a world that moved on without them. Sophie hadn't moved on. She'd stayed. She could have called the police when she found him at the gate. She didn't. She brought him inside, cleaned his wounds, covered him with a blanket. And before she could get the children back to bed, all 20 of them had gathered around his makeshift cot in their pajamas, praying for a stranger with a wolf tattooed on his neck and blood still drying above his eye. When Ji-hoon opened his eyes and found them there, he asked the only thing that made sense in that moment. "Did I die?" And a boy named Noah looked at him very seriously and said, "Are you an angel?" Ji-hoon had been called many things. That was not one of them. What happened over the next 24 hours would not leave him the way he came in, because what he didn't know, and what Sophie didn't know, was that this place had already touched his life once before, long before he fell at that gate, long before either of them had names for each other. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The third uniform didn't dry right. Sophie Ann Caldwell held it up against the kitchen light, a small white collar shirt, 3rd grade, Noah's, and pressed the back of her hand against the fabric, still damp along the seam. She draped it over the back of a chair and turned the space heater 2 inches closer. 11:40 at night. The kitchen smelled like detergent and the last of the rice she'd kept warm on the stove for anyone who woke up hungry. She had been awake since 5 that morning. She would be awake at 5 again tomorrow. This was not a complaint. This was just Tuesday. The washing machine had died 2 weeks ago. A snapped belt. $73 she was waiting on from a grant reimbursement that had not arrived. So tonight she had washed 8 uniforms by hand in the deep sink, wrung them as dry as her hands could manage, and arranged them in a row across the kitchen chairs like small flags. She would iron them at 6. There was always something. Last month it was the front porch step rotted through. The month before that, 2 children had needed glasses. Sophie had found a program, applied, waited, picked up the glasses herself, and put them on 2 small faces that immediately looked at the world like it had just focused. That was the thing about this place. It wasn't broken. It was loved so hard that the loving cost money it didn't have. Hope Garden Home. The name was painted on a wooden sign above the front door. Eunice Morrow's handwriting, even now. Eunice had built this place for 40 years. When Sophie came at 22 as a volunteer, Eunice had looked at her and said, "You've got the staying kind of eyes. Come back Thursday." Sophie had come back Thursday. She had not left. 20 children, all between 8 and 9. Their names were on her heart before they were on the door. She was at the sink rinsing the last mug when she heard it. Not a loud sound. A dull thud, then a scraping. The sound of weight against metal from the side yard. Sophie dried her hands slowly. She had learned, in 12 years of being the last awake, to distinguish sounds. Raccoon at the bins. Scratching, rhythmic. Tree branch against the fence. Intermittent, wind-dependent. This was heavier, This was a body. She took the flashlight from the hook by the back door. She did not take her phone. She did not call anyone. She opened the door and walked out into the cold. The side yard was narrow and dark. A thin corridor between the building and the iron fence that separated them from the alley. The flashlight beam swept left and caught him. A man. On the ground, shoulder against the gate post, one knee bent, his coat dark and wet and torn at the seam of the left shoulder. His face was turned sideways against the ground. She could see a cut above his eye, still bleeding, slow. He was breathing. She confirmed that first, the way Eunice had taught her, check the chest before anything else. She crouched 3 feet away and kept the flashlight steady on him. Korean. 40, maybe older. His hair was black with a streak of silver near the right temple, disheveled and wet. A tattooed wolf, gray, inkwash, mid-stride, visible on the left side of his neck above the coat collar. The kind of tattoo that did not belong to a man who fell off a bike. His watch was cracked, the face splintered but still ticking, expensive. His hands were clean except for the gravel embedded in one palm. He was mumbling. Not to her, to something inside his head, in Korean, fragmented sounds of someone still running somewhere. Sophie sat back on her heels. She could call the police. 20 children asleep inside. A stranger who had clearly been in something that wasn't a traffic accident. The right documented choice was obvious. She watched his chest rise and fall. The door is always open because someone needed it to be. She stood up and knocked on Marcus's door. Marcus Tillman was 68 and slept light and never asked unnecessary questions. He pulled on his work boots without a word and followed her out. Together they got Ji-hoon inside, onto the narrow day bed in the back room, clean sheet, spare blanket. Marcus steadied the man's chest while Sophie worked, cleaned the cut with antiseptic, checked the pupils, confirmed no broken bones, methodical, quiet, without ceremony. Ji-hoon was coming back slowly. His eyes opened once, found her face, found the ceiling, found something that wasn't where he thought he was. His body tensed. Easy, Sophie said. Not a question, not a command. Just a word dropped into the air like a hand on a shoulder. He subsided. She was covering him with a second blanket when she heard the soft sound of feet on the hallway floor. She turned. 20 children stood in the doorway. They had come without being called. One of those silent migrations that happened in this house when the air changed. Pajamas, all of them. Some rubbing their eyes, some fully awake and staring. Noah was at the front. His hands were pressed together in front of his chest, fingers laced, chin tucked down. His eyes were closed. He was praying. Sophie opened her mouth to send them back to bed. She looked at the room, at Marcus in the corner, at this stranger with the wolf tattoo and the cracked watch. At 20 small bodies standing quietly in the doorway of a place that had always kept its door open, and she did not send them away. She sat back down, she let them stay. It was past midnight when Ji-hoon's eyes opened fully for the first time. He looked at the ceiling, then at the wall with children's drawings pinned above the baseboards, then left to the 20 faces arranged in a silent semicircle around the foot of his bed. He tried to sit up. Sophie placed one hand in the air between them, not touching him, just stopping him. Easy, she said again. He looked at her, then at the children, then back at her. I died, he said. His voice was hoarse, his English formal and precise. Noah opened his eyes. No, Noah said, with complete confidence. Miss Sophie said you just fell bad. A girl in pigtails near the back added in a lower voice. But we prayed anyway. Ji-hoon looked at them, one by one. 20 faces that had decided before he opened his eyes that he was worth praying for. He had no response to this. He had never had a response to this in his entire life. The question had no answer he'd ever prepared. Are you an angel? Noah. 8 years old, gap between his front teeth, pajamas that didn't match. standing at the foot of the bed with the complete solemnity of someone who needed the answer to matter. Jihoon looked at the child for a long moment. "No," he said. Noah tilted his head. "Then why did you fall from up there?" He pointed at the ceiling. "I fell from outside," Jihoon said. "From the ground." "The ground is not up there," Noah agreed, processing this, apparently unsatisfied. Sophie stepped in from the doorway, cardigan pulled tight across her chest. "No. Let the man breathe." She sat in the chair beside the bed. The other children had arranged themselves along the walls, some cross-legged on the floor, some leaning against the door frame. Nobody had gone back to sleep. Without Sophie directing it, a girl had retrieved crackers from the kitchen and was passing them around. This was apparently a reasonable thing to do at midnight. Jihoon looked at Sophie. "You should have called the police," he said. "I know. Why didn't you?" She considered the question seriously. "Because you were afraid, even unconscious, and I didn't think the police were what you needed." He watched her. He was a man who spent most of his professional life evaluating whether people were lying. She wasn't lying. She had simply made a decision based on what she observed, and was telling him so directly, without apology. "My name is Kang Jihoon," he said. "Sophie Ann Caldwell. This is Hope Garden Home." She paused. "What trouble is following you?" He looked at the children. She followed his gaze. "They're going to hear it anyway," she said. "They always do." "I had a disagreement with people I work with," he said. "It isn't resolved. There's a possibility they'll look for me." Sophie's expression didn't change. "Can they find you here?" "Not immediately. I don't have my phone. I lost it." "Then you have tonight." She stood. "You can sleep. In the morning, we'll talk about what happens next. But I need you to understand one thing first." She said it the way she said everything, without raising her voice, without reaching for drama. "There are 20 children in this building. Whatever you've walked in from, it does not walk through that door. If I believe at any moment that it might, I will call every number I have." Jihoon held her gaze. "Understood," he said. She nodded and turned to the children. "Back to bed, all of you now." The children moved. Noah was the last to go. At the door, he turned back and gave Jihoon a long, assessing look. "You can have my dinosaur book," he said, "in case you get bored." Then he was gone. Jihoon lay back against the pillow and stared at the ceiling. In 20 years of operating in rooms full of men with weapons and money and leverage, nobody had offered him a dinosaur book. By 6 in the morning, the house was awake. Jihoon had slept 3 hours, more than he expected. Water in the pipes, small feet above him, Sophie's voice from the kitchen, warm and absolute, coffee and toast. He sat up slowly, his ribs ached. His coat was draped over a chair, dried now. His shoes were by the door, cleaned of mud. He had not asked anyone to clean his shoes. He found the kitchen by following the sounds. Sophie was at the stove. 6 children were at the long table eating. The others filed in over the next 4 minutes midst. He counted without meaning to. 20. All seated, a kind of comfortable chaos that had its own order underneath it. Nobody treated his presence as strange. A boy set a mug of coffee in front of him without asking if he wanted one. A girl asked him if he knew what a triceratops ate. A small child sat directly next to him and said nothing. Only occasionally leaned slightly against his arm, the way a tired person leans against a wall. Jihoon sat in the middle of it and did not know what to do with his hands. Sophie moved through the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this long enough that it no longer required thought. Toast, a missing sock, a spilled cup, a child who needed her coat buttoned, all of it without breaking stride. She was the most competent person he had seen in a long time. He was thinking about this when the sound reached him from outside. An engine idling, then a car door, not loud, measured. Jihoon's hand stopped on the mug. Sophie's back was to the window, but her posture changed, a very slight stiffening across the shoulders. and he understood she had heard it too. She turned, looked at the window, then at him. "Yours?" she said quietly. "Possibly." The children were eating. None of them had heard anything. Sophie untied her apron and laid it over the back of a chair. She walked to the front of the house with a steadiness that did not look like courage, because it didn't need to. She had done this 100 times in smaller ways. Jihoon stood. She looked back at him from the hallway. "Stay in here," she said. "Sophie." "Stay in here," she said again. Not a request. She went to the front door. He crossed to the kitchen window and watched. 2 men at the gate. Raymond Cho and another associate, both scanning the building. Raymond's hands in the pockets of a dark track jacket, the second man watching the street. Sophie walked to the gate unhurried. She spoke through the iron bars, posture open but feet planted. He couldn't hear her words. He could read the geometry. She was not yielding an inch. Raymond said something. She responded. He said something else. She looked at the camera mounted above the gate. A deliberate gesture, then looked back at him. Raymond looked at the building, at the windows. Noah was standing at the kitchen window, eating a piece of toast, watching with open curiosity. The second man said something to Raymond. Raymond stepped back from the gate. They left. Jihoon was still standing at the kitchen window when Sophie walked back in. She retied her apron and went back to the stove without speaking. Noah turned from the window. "Miss Sophie told those men this is a children's place, and they had to go," he announced to the table, and she showed them the camera. He looked at Jihoon with unconcealed satisfaction. "Miss Sophie is not scared of anybody." Sophie put a plate of toast in front of Jihoon. He looked at it, then at her. "Thank you," he said, and he was not talking about the toast. The message arrived at 11:17 in the morning. Jihoon had borrowed a phone. One of the children's tablets, actually, running a messaging app he rarely used, an account nobody in his network would think to check. He sent 2 words to a contact who owed him nothing except discretion. "Status now." The answer came back in 4 minutes. He read it twice. Then he set the tablet face down on the table and did not move. The internal challenge was not a challenge. It was a coup. 3 of his senior contacts had been formally approached with a buyout offer. Step aside, and the transition would be clean. 2 of them had already accepted. His financial accounts had not been frozen by a rival. They had been frozen by a legal instrument filed that morning, citing an ongoing inquiry into one of his import companies. Legitimate on paper. His lawyer was unreachable. He had no leverage, no liquid resources, no allies in place. He was alone, not just here, in a borrowed room in an orphanage that smelled like toast and detergent. He was structurally alone. For the first time in 20 years, he pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes and did not move. Outside the door, he could hear Sophie running a math review with 4 of the children. Call and response, her voice patient and precise, the children's voices stumbling and then finding it. One of them laughed at a wrong answer, and Sophie laughed too. Not at the mistake, but with the child. Something in the sound so completely without strategy that Jihoon felt it land somewhere unexpected. His mother had laughed like that. He hadn't thought about his mother in months. He looked at his cracked watch, still ticking. He remembered buying it at 32. The first expensive thing he'd bought for himself after a decade of earning money he spent on other things. Protection, information, alliances. He had stood in the store for 20 minutes deciding. The salesman had waited. Jihoon had been afraid to want something that cost that much, afraid that wanting it would mean something soft about him. He had bought it anyway, worn it every day since. The crack in the crystal felt like something more than accident now. He sat in the borrowed chair in his torn coat and thought about 17. He had been running that night too. Different city, different men, same cold rain, Same sense that the ground kept not being where he expected it. He had squeezed behind a fence near a shelter on the old side of town, not this city, a different one, long ago, and crouched there for a long time. A woman had found him, small and old and not afraid of him at all, which was the thing he remembered most. She had looked at him the way you look at something that needs water. She had brought him inside, given him dry clothes and soup, and when he was warm and eating and didn't know why she had done it, she had said, "When you can help someone, don't ask if it's worth it. Just help." He had carried those words for 24 years. He had never learned her name. He didn't know why he was thinking about this now, in this room, in this building, with a message on a borrowed tablet that told him everything he'd built was being dismantled. He got up and walked to the kitchen. Sophie was alone now, writing something at the table. She looked up when he came in but didn't speak. She had the particular skill of not filling silence with noise. She let it exist, which was unusual and somehow more generous than anything she could have said. He sat across from her. "I need to tell you something," he said. She set down her pen. "My situation is more serious than I told you last night. I'm not in danger of someone finding me here. I'm in danger of losing everything I've spent 20 years building." He paused. "I don't say that to alarm you. I say it because you were honest with me, and I owe you the same." Sophie looked at him steadily. "What does that mean for us?" she asked. "For this house?" "Nothing. Whatever happens with my work, it doesn't reach here. I'll be gone by tonight. You won't hear from me again. Is that what you want?" The question surprised him, not its content, its angle. She wasn't asking what would happen. She was asking what he wanted, as though that was a separate and legitimate thing to consider. He didn't answer. Sophie looked at the table for a moment. Then she got up and poured him a glass of water and set it in front of him without ceremony. "You're welcome to stay through dinner," she said. "After that, I have evening routines, and I need the house calm." He looked at the glass. "Why are you kind to me?" he said. "You don't know what I am." Sophie sat back down and picked up her pen. "I know you fell at my gate and the children prayed for you before you opened your eyes," she said. "I know you told 2 frightened men to leave and they left. I know you haven't touched anything in this house that isn't yours. That's enough for dinner." She went back to writing. Ji-hoon sat with the glass of water for a long time. Outside, he could hear Noah explaining, at high volume and without being asked, that the Triceratops was actually a herbivore, and that people always got this wrong. He picked up the glass. He drank it. And for the first time since the message arrived, the weight in his chest did not feel entirely like collapse. It felt, somewhere at the edges, like something he might still be able to decide about. He stayed for dinner. He did not plan to. But the children set the table, and someone put a chair between Noah and a small girl named Destiny. And Noah said, "That's your chair," with the declarative certainty of someone's who had thought about this, and Ji-hoon sat down. It was the loudest meal he had eaten in 20 years. Afterward, Sophie cleared the plates and he helped without being asked, and she did not comment on this, which was somehow the right response. The children drifted to the common room. The sounds of television and low argument drifted back. Sophie was at the sink when Ji-hoon stopped in the middle of the kitchen and looked at the wall. On the wall, a shelf of framed photographs, the children in various years, group shots, some going back decades. Events: a Christmas, a summer picnic, and in the center of the shelf, a single photograph of a woman, small, slightly stooped, wire-framed glasses, white natural hair in a low bun, standing in front of a wooden sign, the same sign above the door he'd walked through, smiling the way people smile when they are not aware of the camera. Ji-hoon looked at this photograph for a long time. Something in his chest went very still. He turned. "Who is that?" he said. Sophie looked up from the sink. She dried her hands and came to stand beside him. "That's Eunice Morrow," she said. "She founded this place, ran it for 40 years. She passed 2 years ago." She paused. "She was my mentor, the reason I'm here." Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. He looked at the photograph again. The wire glasses, the slight stoop. The way she tilted her head in the photograph, like she was listening to something just off frame. "She used to say the door was always open," Sophie said, "because someone needed it to be." Ji-hoon closed his eyes. He had heard those words from a different version of this woman's face. 24 years younger, in a different city, in the rain, through the door of a building that was not this one, but was, he understood now, the same impulse, the same open door. "She said something else," he said, and his voice was low. "Something like, when you can help someone, don't ask if it's worth it." Sophie turned to look at him. "Just help," she finished. He looked at her. "How do you know that?" she said quietly. "Because she said it to me." His eyes moved back to the photograph. "I was 17. I was running from something. I ended up near a shelter. A different building. A different city. She found me outside the fence and brought me in. Gave me dry clothes and soup." He was quiet for a moment. "I never knew her name. I never knew where that shelter was exactly. I've carried what she said for 24 years. Sophie did not speak. "I didn't fall here by accident," he said. She looked at him for a long time. Then she looked at the photograph. "No," she said softly. "I don't think you did." He came back the next morning, clean, black suit, white shirt, collar open, the cracked watch still on his wrist. He hadn't replaced it. He carried a leather portfolio and asked to speak with her privately, which Sophie arranged by sending the children outside for 15 minutes of yard time under Marcus's supervision. He sat across from her at the kitchen table and opened the portfolio. Inside, a bank draft. $100,000. Sophie looked at it. She did not touch it. "I know what this looks like," Ji-hoon said. "Let me explain it." He told her about Eunice. All of it. The fence, the soup, the words. He told her that when he looked at the photograph last night, he had understood that this place had saved him before he knew it existed. He told her that the money was not charity and it was not strategy. "It's a debt," he said. "One I didn't know I owed until last night. It comes back here because this is where it belongs." Sophie looked at the draft for a long time. "What do you want in return?" she said. "Nothing." She looked at him. "Nothing," he said again. She picked up the draft. She held it carefully, the way you hold something that has weight beyond paper. "Washing machine first," she said finally. "Then the parquinho, then the computers." Ji-hoon almost smiled. In that order," she said. "The children use the parquinho every day. The computers can wait 3 weeks." He nodded. She set the draft on the table between them. "Ji-hoon," she said. He looked at her. "She would have been glad to know she found you again." He did not answer. He didn't have the words for what that sentence did to him. And he had learned, somewhere between last night and this morning, that Sophie did not require him to produce words for things that didn't have them. He folded his hands on the table. 6 weeks later, on the day they finished the parquinho, Noah handed Ji-hoon a drawing. A man in a dark suit with lopsided wings, one pointing up, one tilted sideways. "That's you," Noah said. "But Miss Sophie says you're not an angel yet, you're practicing." Ji-hoon looked at Sophie. She shrugged without apology. "I said everyone can get better with practice." He folded the drawing and placed it in the inside pocket of his suit jacket, against his chest, like something that needed safekeeping. The children ran through the new yard. The sound of it filled the whole block. Ji-hoon stood at the edge of the porch beside Sophie, and after a long quiet he said, "I'm going to keep coming back." "For the orphanage," she said. "At first," he said. "Now I'm less certain that's the only reason." Sophie watched the children. She was quiet long enough that the question could have been swallowed by the afternoon light. Then she said, Come back slowly, Ji-hoon. Children notice when someone promises more than they can keep. Then I won't promise, he said. I'll appear. She didn't answer, but she was still standing there when the yard fell into the long amber light of early evening, and she did not move away. If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. See you there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever helped someone before you knew who they were and found out later that it mattered more than you could have planned? Have you ever been on the receiving end of a kindness so simple it changed something in you that money never could? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about redemption, hidden kindness, and the debts the heart keeps even when the mind forgets, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel